Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at the Métis in the Northwest. Okay. After many of the Métis left the Red River area, they began to recreate the pattern of establishment they had at Red River. They laid out their traditional lands according to the seigneurial system. And the Catholic Church was again always the center of the community, giving credence to their French background. Income was drawn from subsistence living, the buffalo hunting, and hauling of freight. Remember, they did not live outside of their means. They lived a life where, hey, we get enough food, we get enough this, we get enough that, just to survive. They were not going out there and overstretching their boundaries, and especially with the buffalo hunt that was heavily regulated, they always made sure that they would have enough buffalo to fulfill their needs going forward. The beginnings of New Start were good and profitable because, again, they're starting off new in new areas, and they had access to the Hudson Bay Company and things like that. During the 1870s, this brought about change. The bison were beginning to disappear. Now, what was happening in many parts of North America, in particular the U.S., was the U.S., to get people to farm, need to get rid of the buffalo so they wouldn't lose their crops when the buffalo came through. So in the U.S., people were being paid to kill the buffalo and clear them of their areas. So as the U.S. starts to do this, it's obviously going to have an impact on the Métis in Canada, because a lot of the buffalo, they roam between Canada and the United States. So as many of the buffalo are killed in the United States, this is going to dramatically affect the Métis and their subsistence style of living. They couldn't coexist with the homesteads that were developing and settling in the Northwest. We have seen that before in Red River, where more Europeans were coming in and establishing their ways of doing things, and the Métis were being seen as secondary. And what was happening is, as these new settlers were settling in Canada as well, they were also killing off all the buffalo. So what was happening is, over time, the buffalo were being killed off, and the Métis way of life was under serious threat. In December of 1873, the Métis adopted the laws of St. Laurent. This was done in order to protect the bison that were still around and severely restrict the amount of buffalo that were being hunted, so they could keep the stocks going for the next few years. The laws governed all aspects of life in the settlement, including the hunt. So this is, in a way, setting up their new style of life, new style of governance within the Métis society. And the rules were obviously there to conserve the bison as long as they could, because they realized that the bison were slowly being eliminated from the prairies. All right, the laws of St. Laurent were fairly simple when you think about it in regards to governance. Okay, the community would elect a president and council, and they would be required to meet. Okay, if the members of the council were unable to make a meeting, they were fined, because they see this as an important role that in their society, that these people are there to help make the decisions for the community. So there was no real excuses for missing any of these meetings. The council had final authority to rule on any disputes in the community, whether it be over land, in a way, judicial issues. When it came to complaints against other people, they would be the final say in what would happen. Captain of the bison hunt regulated the hunt and all provisions. So before they went out for the hunt, they set out the numbers of buffalo that would be killed in order to survive. And if people went out on their own and killed buffalo, they would be severely punished. Now, these laws did not take the place of the authority of the Canadian government. The Métis believed that the Canadian government would respect their community laws. Okay, as you can see, the Métis wanted this as more of a local style government. They wanted to respect Canadian laws, as they felt that they were a part of Canada, and they felt that the Canadian people would help them as well. All right, Lawrence Clark, he's chief factor at Fort Carlton. He had been with the HBC for a number of years. He was ambitious and made a show of trying to get along with both the Métis and the settlers. You have to understand, it was a show only. He believed the Métis were inferior, used his powers to lower the standard of living. The Métis hired the Métis on temporary contracts instead of full-time work, and paid them as little as possible. He began paying in trade goods and not cash. So what happens is he severely limits the Métis and what they can do, because if they weren't able to get any money from their work with the HBC, they would not be able to go to stores and different things like that to buy food. So without them having money to buy food and that, he is effectively trying to starve them out. He asked the government for a magistrate becoming a judge, okay, to enforce the law. So here's the guy who was in charge of the Hudson Bay fort, but he was also now in charge of all legal matters. He was made the magistrate, used his powers for the benefit of the HBC. So any disputes that would arise, he sided when it came to the HBC. He wanted to make sure the Métis were kept under control, and in a way, he wanted to make sure anything he could do just try and squeeze out the Métis culture. All right. If any of the people objected to any of the low pay or conditions, they would be imprisoned. He would throw them in jail as a sign of, hey, you're challenging my authority and you need to be punished. All right, the winter of 1874-1875 was very difficult. The bison had effectively been eliminated on the prairies, so the subsistence lifestyle of the Métis was essentially gone. They couldn't make pemmican anymore, so therefore there was a loss of income, and many of the Métis began to struggle severely. In the spring of 1875, a group of Métis who were not members of the St. Laurent community began to hunt bison before the official hunt began. So this went directly against the laws of St. Laurent. So Gabriel Dumont, who was a part of the laws of St. Laurent, and he was president, he put out an arrest for those people who were hunting illegally, and they're tried in the Métis courts and found guilty. However, those people appealed to the chief factor Clark, and he sided with those people who were arrested by the Métis, and he actually put out an arrest warrant for Gabriel Dumont and others involved in this situation. Now, the Canadian government admits that Clark was wrong in what he did. He did not have the authority to go out and arrest Gabriel Dumont and others for what they did. However, they did nothing about it. So essentially, Clark was able to do what he wanted. He arrests Gabriel Dumont and others, and he convicts them. Effectively, he just gives them small fines, but as we know, the Métis had limited resources for money and things like that. So therefore, it was more of a sign of who's in charge during this. So what happens is, essentially, when Clark says the Métis, you are wrong when it comes to hunting the bison, you cannot limit things like that. The laws of St. Laurent were effectively null and void now, and the laws of the bison hunt did no longer exist. Now, you have to understand, with no laws regarding the hunt of the bison, that meant it was a free-for-all. Anybody could do what they want, kill off all the buffaloes they want, things like that. So essentially, by Clark doing this, he has really struck a chord with the Métis in regards to, hey, their lifestyle is now going to be changed, and these Métis are going to have to either conform or go another direction. The situation ended with the Métis finding themselves in a terrible situation. They had no rights to their own laws, no right to conserve their livelihood. As you can see here with this image, that's what it was like after the St. Laurent laws were gone. The buffalo hunt was no longer regulated. There's just a mass slaughter of buffalo. Everyone took their freedom and ran on the buffalo without any guide of their insatiable keenness, passion for killing, and greed. Avarice, anarchy, self-interest reigned on the prairie. So essentially anybody could kill the buffalo however they wanted, including Métis people who were not a part of the laws of St. Laurent. And effectively the buffalo were wiped out on the prairie. And here's just another image of what it was like after the slaughter of the buffalo on the prairies. In the 1870s come to a close, Métis saw themselves as powerless to deal with the sweeping changes going through the Northwest. In 1873, the Liberals come to power under Alexander Mackenzie, and they kind of left the Métis alone on the prairies during this time period. And what we mean by leaving them alone, they essentially left them alone to suffer on the prairies with no support, no anything like that. While they focused on getting more and more European settlers to this area, the Métis were effectively left on their own. As you can tell, this is going to cause a lot of frustration within the Métis, and the Métis see what what's happening here is very similar to Red River, and what we'll eventually see in this chapter is the Métis having enough and trying to stand up for the rights again.